Thanks for tuning into this video about the construction industry blueprint for better mental health and suicide prevention. And we'll just take you through a few bits and pieces about how that document is actually implemented in a practical way within our industry. The document have 5 pillars, and they are suggestions to the type of activities that you can do as a business within the industry to promote better mental health and reduce suicide. It's a sad fact that in our industry we lose too many workers to suicide, and that's a reflection of general things happening within our industry. And there are things we can actually do about it, we know that. The blueprint have, as I said, 5 different activities. The first activity is we need to promote the positive aspects of work. Work is good for us, work is good for our mental health, and we need to make the most out of that benefit. Secondly, we need to reduce the negative aspects of work. There's certain things we do in a day-to-day business that can actually harm people and cause them injury, and of course we need to limit that as far as practical. The third thing we can do is we can improve mental health and suicide prevention literacy. It means that we can actually have a language that we start talking about it more openly within our sites, with each other and with our workers and with our managers. The fourth pillar talks about getting help early, about how do we have a system and how do we have a way within our workplaces where we can facilitate when somebody is struggling, we get in time, we get in as early as practical, we get in before things develop to something more serious. And the fifth pillar is really about talking about when somebody is struggling, how do we care for them? How do we get them back to where they're best served in our workplace, best supported in our workplace, earning money, being part of the business. So these are the 5 pillars of the workplace, of the blueprint, and we'll take you through them in a little bit more details, and I'll hand you over to Nick for that.
So now that we've heard from Jorgen about what the Blueprint for Better Mental Health actually is, I'd just like to run through a few process related things that we do with a company when they want to endorse and sign up to the Blueprint. So normally what we find is that at a site level or a company level, there's an individual who is a bit of a mental health advocate and who are keen to work with mates to endorse the Blueprint. Sometimes that's the head of HR, sometimes that's a safety representative, sometimes it's a project manager on site. There are a variety of different people who might be identified as that right person to undertake this survey with us. There's no right or wrong port of call. It might just be that an individual site is signing up to the Blueprint. It might be that an overarching company is signing up to the Blueprint. We want anybody who feels comfortable to fill out the survey with a mate's representative to do that work. So once you've identified who that is, we ask you to fill out this survey with them. So this survey was developed in conjunction with Melbourne University and the late Dr. Alison Milner, who was a member of the Mates board and heavily involved in the research component of the broader Mates business. And the survey asks a variety of questions that ultimately allow you to have a pretty robust conversation with that representative from the company around what they're doing when it comes to these 5 principles in good workplace mental health. There's no right or wrong way to actually undertake this survey. It's whatever you're comfortable with. So I was going to share an example of how I've rolled out the survey with a particular company, just so that you can see what it might look like in practice. All right, John, thanks for meeting with me today. We've been out on site doing a couple of GATs and that kind of thing with your most recent project. Did you want to tell me a little bit more about your company and where you're at?
Yeah, thanks, Nick. So look, we're a small commercial industrial organisation. I've got about 25 staff. We turn over around $70 to $80 million a year. Okay. And predominantly we work in some institutions. We do churches, we do schools, we do some small office renovations. We've done the liquor outlets, stores. Okay. Yeah. So that's where we focus most of our work, and we try to have steady clients. Most of my staff, I've got a team of a couple of project managers. I've got maybe 8 or 9 site managers to try to run different jobs.
I think that's who got us on this job. Yeah.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. And then we have a couple of contract administrators. I've got an estimator in the office.
Okay.
with couple of whosos, and we have a roaming consultant, health and safety consultant, that comes onto our jobs every month and just gives us an audit report.
Yeah, great. So what we're going to talk about today is the blueprint for better mental health in the building and construction industry. So it's a 5-pillared framework for what companies can do to invest in their teams to improve their overall mental health and well-being. So this particular survey, it's not a compliance document. It's not going to get you in trouble. It's a completely confidential tool that we use to have a conversation like we are now. And from that, we'll develop a bit of a report for you as to where you're tracking against any other company that's filled out the survey over the last 2 years.
Sure.
So does that make sense?
It does. I mean, our journey is very new. We're only just starting off to understand a little bit more about mental health. Typically, I've always thought it was someone else's problem, and now I'm starting to understand that the company can play a role on the sites and how we manage our sites. So I'm happy to contribute any way I can.
Great. All right, so it takes about between 20 minutes to half an hour, so we might just make a start. The first couple of questions are just some information about your company for us to get in contact with you.
Sure.
So if you wanted to fill that out, but before you do that, I'll just draw your attention to this first page, which explains the whole project itself. I think you've read this earlier.
I have, yes.
And just the ethics attached to how
Sure.
we do this particular piece of research.
Sure.
So this just here asks you to consent to the survey.
Would I proceed? Yes, I do, yeah.
Fantastic.
I consent to take part in the survey. No problems at all. So the 3 main tasks. Well, the first thing I do is try to win work. So my job is to smooch a few architects, get onto tender lists,
Okay.
and then at the end of the day negotiate the contracts to get them across the line. So then the second thing I would do is then allocate the jobs to who is the foreman, who is the site manager best suited for the role of the job. Different job foremen have got different skills, so I have to mix and match. And I've got specialists in certain areas. Well, I've got a finishing foreman, I've got a structural foreman, and I've also got my site managers that have done schools. Well, I'd keep them on schools.
Okay.
So that's how I manage that. And then the third thing I do is, well, I have to monitor the performance. Every month I've got to know that the jobs are tracking along the budget.
Okay.
And so I have to look at our progress claims, I have to look at our claims against the progress of the job itself. And because we have good and bad jobs, and the idea is to pick up the bad jobs as quickly as you can. Where are you bleeding money that wasn't in the budget? And so I have to monitor performance of all my projects every month.
The reason we ask this question is sometimes it can be a bit vague, like you mentioned, who's actually responsible for policies and processes when it comes to workplace mental health. And so what we're trying to do here is identify, are there any trends in the industry? So is it the whoso that's filling this out majority of the time? Is it a director like yourself? Or is it somebody else within the business? So that's the main reason we ask.
Well, the question about do I have any specific responsibility for mental health, I have to tell you, I would say no. I don't see myself as the originator of thought around mental health. I think my job is to perhaps set up the jobs where there's a culture of people that can talk about issues, and the general awareness training for mates is the first start of getting everybody to realise that we're all in this. So I wouldn't say I've got a specific responsibility. I'd say I have a more general oversight of how do I want my jobs to run, how do I want people to behave. And that's a tough journey because the industry is still very, very hard on people. So it's not that I'm going soft on them, it's just that I think we've got to keep an eye out a bit better than we ever used to.
Which is great. I wish we had more people in the industry like yourself.
Well, that's the plan. I'm not saying we do a great job of it, but that's the plan.
No worries. So there's a few more questions there just about what your company actually does in terms of the type of work.
So we just rely on Queensland, and I do speak on behalf of the organisation, but if you interviewed some of my site managers, you'd get their view of how they set up a job and how they run their subby meetings. We have every Tuesday is a subby meeting, and then we have a client briefing every fortnight where the client comes in and hears about the progress of the job, and that'll be with the architect or the client's project manager. But our site managers are all bound to have subcontractor meetings every Tuesday.
Excellent. There's some questions about subbies, but we'll get to that a little bit further on.
So we're the builder.
survey.
We're
Okay.
typically the head contractor.
Yep.
We're the builder. We employ a whole range of subcontractors across all the different streams, and you can see there in the form those types of subbies is exactly who we engage.
No worries.
We have, I'll say 20 to 50,
Yep.
even though it's not quite the category, but we're 20 to 50.
20 to 50 direct employees. Yeah.
Direct employees. In terms of the estimated number of employees, this is a really interesting question. So on a typical $5 million school, we would probably have at its peak 30 or 40 people, and that's been when the steel's going up and the concrete's being poured, 10 concreters will come in for the day.
Yep.
That'll throw the numbers up.
Yep.
And then as the structural trades move off and the finishing trades come in, the numbers tend to go up. We have the painters, the plasterers, the tilers, the electricians, they all come in.
Yep.
But our peak job would probably sit around 30 to 40 blokes.
I thought it might have been a bit higher, but that's good to know. That's
And again, if you were on a big job, so if you were on a $50 million job, you would get to 100, 150 guys at a peak. And it really is associated with the nature and the size of the job.
The main reason we ask this is to give us an indicator of how many workers are actually being covered off or a part of an organisation that's supporting the blueprint.
Yes, so our sites would typically have 20 to 30 people.
Okay.
It would go up to 40 or 50 at a peak and then go back to an average of 20 people.
Great.
That's the sort of work that we do. The number of workers under the control and supervision of the organisation, on any given time when we add all our sites, because I try to run about 5 to 10 projects at a time.
Must be busy.
Which is why I've got my 9 site managers.
Sure.
I would expect them to all have around 20 to 30. Certainly not at the start of the job, but in the middle of the job, which means we could have up to 200, 300 people easily under our supervision at any one point in time.
Rightio. So as discussed, these next questions are about the first pillar of the blueprint, which is promoting the positive aspects of work. So things that make people want to come up and show up to work and experience the benefits of, friendship and companionship and being a part of a team. So what we're asking you here is really just to rate how your organisation approaches some of these activities.
I have to tell you, if my blokes could stay home and get paid, they'd be just as happy. In fact, they'd be happier. So I'm not sure I can come into the sentiment, even though I know that work is positive for mental health. There's no question about that.
Well, connection's positive.
And connection is positive. So, but we're also pretty tribal. So, the brickies have lunch together, the steel fixers together, the form workers together. So we're pretty tribal in terms of the trades. But in that sense, they do enjoy each other's company and they do like to work together, and the teams is clearly the best way of working. So we set up the projects the way we want. We set up the teams in terms of the subbies. We set up the program. So all the subbies have to come on board with our program.
Oh, great.
And
does that include your processes around looking after people when it comes to mental health?
And so it's just starting. That journey is just starting. Where through the safety committee, we're now giving permission to people to raise issues around the site. If we had a really bad bully on the site, I'd expect to hear about that when there was once a time I would never hear about that. So we're trying to give permission for people to have the site set up.
That's great.
And be a little bit more open.
That's fantastic.
We still flog subbies if they're coming behind. We still tell them they need more men when they're falling behind program. But that really nasty stuff that we used to live with, we're trying to get that out of the industry. There's no place for it.
Fantastic. So what about these specific questions? So would you say that when it comes to informing all of your workers about the project's timelines and milestones, that you do that well?
To be fair, each subby has to nominate whether it's their team leader or supervisor. Supervisor's the right term. all of our jobs, each major subby has a supervisor, and that supervisor has to come to the Tuesday meeting. And the Tuesday meeting sets out what have we done in the last week, what are we doing in the next week, who is behind program, where we need cooperation between the trades. So if we're bringing a crane in, we need to tell everybody the crane is coming in on a certain day. If we're jumping the crane, we need to tell everybody that certain parts of the job are going to be restricted. We're going to have zones for safety zones, and so people get told about that.
So it sounds like you're doing this really well. So you strongly agree that you're informing workers of the milestones.
Well, this is the problem. I'm trying to make a distinction between the supervisor and the workers. If the supervisor does his or her job properly and tells his own staff this is what's happening, then yes, I could say strongly agree. But if the supervisor keeps the program to himself, is a poor communicator, then I can't strongly agree. But we do try at least to keep everybody, in terms of the management team, up to date with the program.
So where do you think you'd rate as an organisation?
As an organisation, I'd say we agree that we try to keep the project and timelines together.
But potentially you could do a bit better.
We could do better, definitely,
Yeah.
definitely. Where possible, workers on site are informed and engaged in the community purpose. Again, I don't think it's explicit. I'm going to put that as a neither agree or disagree. The community purpose of the project, like they all know we're building a school. What they take from it, I have to tell you, the experience is building workers are terribly proud of the work they do.
And they should be.
And so they do know what they're building without me telling them it's a school.
Yeah.
You know, so the organisation, as well as the subbies, have access to peer support networks. It's only really been through the general awareness training that we've had access to understanding that there is a peer support network. It's been an area where you've really been on your own. So
Connectors
and connectors, and all of a sudden we've now got a place for them, which typically we have not had. So I would like to think that we do have, I can agree that we do have peer support networks now, having started the journey with mates. In terms of social responsibility, we're often doing fundraising. We don't know about Fly the Flag. You'll have to tell us about Fly the Flag. What's that?
Yeah, sure. It's kind of in tandem with Are You OK Day. So it's a day where mates gets sites that are accredited. So they have assist workers and connectors to come together and really make sure that their friends and their colleagues and their mates are travelling okay, and raise awareness around having those tough conversations around how to reach out for support and how to support your mate if they're doing it tough. So it's a bit of a brand awareness campaign.
Oh, well, we might be able to sign up for that next year.
Yeah.
So keep going, Nick. What else have we got here?
So you do these activities?
We do some fundraising from time to time. We'll have a charity day.
You strongly agree?
Strongly agree.
Agree, yep.
Yeah, I put agree.
What
We
about-
don't have open days, but
Okay.
we do, well, now that we can sign up for Fly the Flag, and we have done the odd member, we've had people grow their mows,
Yeah.
and some other charities from time
We
to
can
time,
put
but it's
that
ad hoc.
Just down here, because we just asked for some examples of things you might be doing already, independent of mates or...
Yeah, no, we've done some cancer
Yeah, great.
fundraising,
And you mentioned
and we've done the Movember as well. At different guys at different times try to raise money through the sites
Great.
and the company. Where else are we up to
So
here,
this
Mick?
is the second pillar, which is reducing the harmful impacts of work. So things that we know in the industry can really get people down. So long hours, job insecurity, all those things that can really play on people's mind. So we're just asking you here to kind of have a look at what might be happening at your company and where you think you rate when it comes to these particular things.
So to be fair, as a small to medium-sized commercial company, our risk profile is not as high as, say, the tier one major contractors. Our damages for a delay might be $5,000 a day. Theirs $30,000 and $40,000 a day. So the pressure on the big sites is amazing. So we don't work weekends unless we get caught. We have to get electricity permission to work on a Saturday or Sunday, so it's special after hours work. But there are some sites, of course, that are working nights and weekends systematically all the time. That's not us. So in terms of work content, I would say that our organisation has got reasonably, I'll say we agree that we've got some good policies. We don't have excessive hours. Communication's always a problem with the site, so I'll put a neither agree or disagree. Our roles are clear. People do know their roles.
That's good.
We go out of our way to make sure. Fatigue we don't do much about. We hope people will get their rest, but we don't ask them, did you get 8 hours last night sleep?
Do you have policies around it though?
We don't. No, we don't.
That might be something to work on.
On some mine jobs, when I've had to work 12-hour days as part of the mine policy, they had fatigue policies, but only when I went up there to do some housing sites years ago. But we haven't got our own.
Okay.
And
it really impacts safety if someone's working and...
And to be fair, again, I must admit, when we do the liquor outlets, we have to have the whole thing done over a weekend. We work all through the night, all through the day. So I think that I'm going to put disagree on my fatigue and maybe think that, on my work rostering. I'm going to put I disagree that we've got good policies and maybe think I should review them.
Yeah.
Because particularly when we're doing some shop fitting, we just work all through the night. And we bring subbies in. Our supervisors could be there 24 hours straight. It
can have a real impact.
And we we just say, oh, rest the next day when you get home on Monday. But we should look at that a bit more.
Yeah, good. And that's something we can help you with as well. Once you get that report back and it says, that this might be an area that you could improve slightly for your business, we can point you in the right direction and help you with that. And
in terms of interpersonal behaviour, I'm going to say we've got some... I'm not saying I've got good policies, but I've got good culture.
Great.
So I don't know whether that's the same, but again, we work with churches, we work with schools. Our blokes have to be more respectful than normal. We have to work within school rules a lot of the time. And I guess the tricky part is, it's great you've got a good culture, but what happens if someone wasn't fitting in with that really good workplace culture? How would you work with them to... It's a good question. I have to tell you, 95% of our labour is through subcontractors. So if we had a subcontractor employee that was misbehaving, we would ask the subcontractor to remove them from our sites, which doesn't solve the problem, but it gets it off my job. Pretty the next job. Might be something to look at again when you're doing that review. Yes, I think I can look at that and put that as an area of improvement. Our supervisors are trained, yes they are, they very strongly agree. Great. They're very strong. And they understand that there is an EAP. Okay, so you do have an EAP? Yeah, it's an external thing. Okay. As long as they, not a big take up. Yeah. As long as they knew that it was confidential, we were okay. But the minute they thought that we'd get a report on them, end of story, just killed the whole program. Sometimes it's worth just reconnecting with your EAP if you haven't had a good take-up and getting some posters and some awareness on site so that people know it's accessible. Because sometimes, you might say it at induction, but then people forget about it. Whereas if you've got the visibility, they know that, oh yeah, I can actually call this free counselling service. And it's interesting. We probably think we're a bit small, because blokes know what others are doing a bit in their lives. We're a bit small, but you're right, we don't have a big take-up. No. And you're probably paying a management fee, so it's worth also getting them out to site and talking to people. They don't have to do counselling then and there, but just explaining what the EAP actually does, because that's normally part of your contract. Well, in terms of the next question about all workers on site, the answer is disagree. Okay. It's just for our people. Okay. We don't give it to our subbies. Is that something you might be able to look at in the future? Or? It's something I've never really thought of. Yeah, okay. As I said, my team, I look after my team. I expect the subbies to look after them. So I'm not taking that on at the moment. No, that's fair. And our EAP program doesn't take it on. Yeah, okay. Some of the really big jobs, I know you're not a tier one, but the state government's moving towards here in Queensland actually saying to the principal contractor that they are going to have to provide EAP counselling to any subcontractor on that site to get the job. So I'm conscious, you're not quite ready to make that call or consider it, but there is a shift in the industry happening. So it might be something to think about moving forward. Well, without exuding all my bias, to rely on a subcontractor who's even smaller than me to take on an EAP program is a big ask. And so that method that you're proposing where the head contractor takes it on, it could work. Providing it's still not looked as being imposed. It's got to be done voluntarily.
Absolutely, and confidentially.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's where you're going to have a problem, I think. Hazard mitigation for harmful impacts as part of our health and safety. Our risk management program is the foundation of our health and safety program.
Excellent.
So we do risk management all the time. Work method statements, all sorts of other forms of risk are identified and then managed. So I strongly agree that we do the hazard mitigation. Our organisation, appropriately trained person, as I said, to provide emotional support. Well, that's a tough one. Who would they come to? I'm going to put disagree in an area for us to work on.
Okay.
Because we don't have anyone who's specifically trained in emotional support. We would be able to give them the practical, physical, medical support, but I'm not sure we hold their hands and sing Kumbaya.
Sometimes it's just about being respectful though. So if someone is struggling or they're having a really rough trot, just pointing them in the right direction to get support. And from what I've seen of your supervisors doing the connector and gap training, I'm pretty confident that they'd provide excellent support.
And to be fair, since we've started this journey with mates, it's almost given permission. The stigma around mental health has come down. We've had a couple of supervisors with depression, and that changed the culture of the organisation because it's not just a malingerer's disease. These were good blokes who got sick, and so that's given us all a bit more tolerance to understand it.
So does that change your score then?
So I'm going to leave it. I'll put it as a agree, but I'll put it soft agree.
Yep.
Because it means I want to do some work in that space.
Which is great. And again, that report will kind of identify that one.
We also you have natural people for emotional support. There are people who just attract others to go and talk to. We've got a couple of those, but they're not on every job. So sometimes it's a bit hit and miss. Our organisation pre-plans for high-risk areas for suicide, such as near iconic sites. I have to tell you, someone was on drugs when they wrote that question. We have no consideration for what is a high-risk suicide site unless we're on the Gateway Bridge. We wouldn't know.
It's pretty common. Not necessarily for a person on site, but for the general public, to see a construction site as somewhere, if they're having a really difficult time in considering suicide, it's actually a really good place of means, unfortunately. So it's important for the workers on that site to know that you as a company are preempting that there is a pretty big risk that somebody could come in late at night and access the site. And
so we don't know the sites, right? We don't know that, but we certainly now have to box up our cranes.
Perfect.
And we have to put formwork right up to the top. We have to lock them out. It's become standard because the industry has had quite a few suicides from cranes. Not workers necessarily, but members of the public. So the companies have long realised they now have to box it up completely and secure the gates at the bottom to stop people from climbing up our cranes. So we do that.
Yeah, well,
but
you're already doing it then.
But we don't say, this is an iconic site where people traditionally or historically have killed themselves with. That's a bridge too far. We don't do that.
But you plan.
We plan.
And there's a risk.
Because it's purely a safety issue of mitigation. The duty is to our staff and to others.
And you're aware.
So if someone from the street can come onto our sites, our site security has to be better. And around cranes, it has to be better again. Because we know it's a foreseeable risk. Our organisation engages to mitigate harmful mental health exposures. Well, I've ticked a few of those boxes.
You didn't want to give some examples for us?
I think we are conscious about ours, and we're conscious around showing support. So you've got to allow some sort of support and understanding for people to raise concerns. So we would allow that. We do that.
Sounds like, John, too, you're pretty methodical about how you approach the work, and you put mental health support within all of that method.
Well, that's probably where we're shifting. We would typically look after their physical body in terms of health and safety. The shift is to say, well, health and safety, mental health and safety, is where we should be taking our roles and our responsibilities. So it's still a journey, but we don't longer argue that it's not our responsibility. That's been done. The question is now, what's the best way? What are the avenues to provide that level of support? We don't take it all on, but we take on a bit of what we think we can take on.
Which is great.
So this next part, Nick,
So we're up to
about the
number 3.
subcontractors?
Well, actually, yes, no, we're still going with number 2. So this is just about your policies in relation to subcontractors. So they're the same questions, but we want to know about, do your subcontractors have the same kind of accessibility and policies when it comes to all of this stuff around hazards?
So to be fair, as a smaller organisation, our contracts specify that the subcontractors have to do anything in accordance with the builder's program. So again, if we were working on a weekend, working at a liquor outlet and doing 24/7 for 3 days straight, we would just say, you tendered, this was the program, you provide your rest breaks, nothing to do with us, we just want you to work in accordance with our program. So
in theory, they'd be treated exactly the same as your direct employees.
in theory, we expect them to work the way we work, and we tie them in to follow our instructions. So we have got a number of clauses around following instructions around our safety policies. So they have to sign up to our safety policies.
Okay.
In terms of our hours, we set the site hours, we set the boundaries, what day will work, what hours will work. We set that.
Okay.
And they sign up to that. Now, some of them have worked in other areas and therefore have more sophisticated policies themselves, but I have to tell you, most of them don't. They just follow the lead from the builder.
But there is that clear expectation there.
There's a very clear, it's in contract, that they will follow our policies and procedures. Yep.
So therefore, these are going to be the same. So you could
They
just-
are going to be the same.
Okay. All right.
You know, yes, as above. And in terms of working on sites to train their supervisors, again, we try to get their supervisors to come into our cultural understanding, so our meetings are run properly. So subbies on our sites expected to train their supervisors. Train's a strong word, you know, we expect them to provide supervisors.
But for example, they'd come to a general awareness training if it was on offer.
Oh, we would encourage that. We would encourage, in fact...
But do they have to?
Well, that's a good question. I can control them to do lots of things, but whether I can control them to come to a mate's general awareness training or not, I'm not sure I could. So,
And that's, I guess, where what you mentioned in terms of the contract, maybe that's something to look at,
absolutely.
adding a clause.
Absolutely. And so I'm going to put disagree because I don't think I have the direct power now. I've got some power, as I told you, but to get them to come and understand their roles in managing assistance project, that's but that is something for the future to look at. We require our subbies to have a diversity policy. We don't. So no, we don't disagree.
So again,
But
something you might be able to
again,
build
but
in.
our culture is we're not into this. We're not into anyone being singled out and abused for any of their own particular ethnicities or gender orientations, or we're just not
And it's
doing that.
great that you've got that culture.
We just want building workers to be building workers.
But what happens when a subby isn't a part of that?
It's a really good question, and I would like to think that there's none of this, but sites sometimes are sites. So, but there's definitely some work there. I'll put a question mark about whether there's more we could do in that
And we
space.
can work with you on that as well.
And if we had a diversity clause, we don't. If we had a diversity program, we could then insist our subbies sign up to it as part of the contract.
And it could be pretty straightforward.
Oh, it could be, yeah. Okay, well, we could talk about that.
Yeah.
I don't know what that would look like, but we can talk about that. We don't do FIFO or drive in, drive out. Shifting. Now, what is this next standard? Literacy?
So this is providing mental health and suicide prevention literacy. So this is Mates' main bread and butter. So you just have to rate yourself against how you feel that you're actually achieving this as a company on site.
In terms of mental health literacy?
Yeah, yep. So the first question there is...
we don't provide a module.
In your
unless you
induction?
call... No. Oh, no, we don't. No.
Okay.
No, so I'm going to have disagree.
Yeah, okay.
Do we provide suicide awareness? Well, now that we've had general GAT training, so we certainly are now giving some information such as GAT. The problem is, of course, in 3 months' time, they'll have a different cohort of people.
But you're committed to doing
And
the
if we
training,
get back,
which we're
GAT back again.
easily able to do.
Yeah,
so.
yeah. So we provide the suicide prevention awareness. Yeah, I'll put agree on that, but it's not flyers, it's more the GAT training. So I'll just put GAT down here.
We can provide you with flyers if you need them.
Okay, well, we do, we have got a couple of your posters. So I guess we got the posters as well. So, okay. We've got the Mates posters. Our organisation provides mental health awareness information to all workers on site. Well, when we do the training, we do, but it's not, you know, we don't keep a register of every new worker that comes onto the job and say, have you done GAT? We don't do that.
Do you think that's something that might be achievable?
So I think it's no, I don't. I think it's a problematic issue that we carry people at the time when we do the training. Having said that, the industry is training people, so we get people who have already done GAT coming to the jobs, and they're bringing their knowledge and understanding already. But it's a gap, I'd say. It's a gap that we need to have a look at. Our supervisors, well, they do the GAT training. You can't try to have a culture without everyone understanding, getting on the same page.
Absolutely.
So we would agree with that totally. A peer-based support system. What do you think that means,
So
Nick?
that'd be your connectors.
Oh,
so where you know
okay.
you can approach someone and you can be supported and you're going to be okay if something's happening in your life that's a bit difficult.
Okay, well, we haven't got to that, so I'm going to put
Okay.
disagree.
But we're doing the connector
And
training
then,
soon.
and then I'll put a note to connectors, because that then gets a framework for the organisation, and we will have peer support.
Great.
And if they self-select, which is how a connector should
That's how it
work,
works.
that can work for us as well. It'd be great to have a connector on every site.
What about if a subby put their hand up to be a connector?
I think it's great.
Would you support them?
I absolutely
Yeah,
would.
great, great.
And in fact, it begs that question
Good to
about
know,
if we
yeah.
want connectors, we want a culture. And the way you get a culture is through the subbies. So we can show some leadership, but then you've got to then put your money where your mouth is and let them go and have the time. And so that's a really interesting question, because that links again into our contract
Absolutely.
with our subbies
Yep.
about them supporting the supervisors and or nominees, because I like the volunteer model for connectors. Our organisation has engaged external service. No, we've never done that, apart from our own EAP.
What about Mates?
Ah,
Well, I guess that's an interesting question though, because we're part of the industry, so it's not necessarily external.
yeah.
So you can answer that however you like.
Oh, well,
John.
I think if that's the case, I'll put agree and I'll put Mates in
Yep.
as my answer. A diversity policy, no, we haven't got one.
But that's something we might
But
work
again, it's something, because then if we do that, we can roll that out through the company and then through the subbies.
Absolutely.
In contract. Our organisation uses industry peers speaking about their own mental health. Is that what you do from time to time? Does Mates provide speakers?
We can facilitate that. Yeah, there's a couple of really good organisations like Roses in the Ocean,
Okay.
who have a really safe format for how they support someone to share their story in a safe way. So it's not re-traumatising them all.
So I'll put neither agree or disagree, but I'll leave that open,
Yeah.
because if we're going to do a toolbox talk, it might be a perfect opportunity for someone to just be a lived experience. And to be fair, what's happening now is that nearly everybody in the industry knows
Somebody.
someone who has suicided or someone who's been associated with someone who's suicidal. That's what's happening. So our business engages to provide mental health prevention literacy. Well, we'll put GAT and we'll put connectors.
Absolutely.
Um,
And then
and we'll put the EAP.
you mentioned you invest quite a bit in your supervisors.
Yes.
Do they ever do any other kind of specialist mental health training, mental
No.
health first aid, or?
No, we don't.
No.
We are strong on their technical training. So I make sure they know how to put a progress claim together and get the variations.
Yeah.
But no. But again, it's an evolving process.
Might be
We're on a
something.
journey, and if we all understand what we're trying to achieve, then a bit more knowledge, a bit more literacy, a bit more understanding could only be a good thing.
Absolutely.
So what is this next part? Early intervention. What is this?
Early
Nick?
intervention and treatment. So this is just about supporting people before an issue becomes a significant one. So what kind of things do you have already operating in your business?
I have to tell you, we're pretty poor at the
EAP?
prevention.
Yeah.
Even that's a reactive.
Yeah.
You know.
It can be preventative though.
Yeah, but I'm not rating it as a great success for our model.
Sure.
So, like, you know, if say one of our site managers or site foremen is going through a divorce, we don't normally get involved unless they put their hand up. So, that's a tough one for us.
And that might be where that training I mentioned could really come in handy as to how to, if someone discloses that, you know, there is a bit of a challenge coming up in their personal life that's going to impact their mental health, how can you support them at the earliest possible interval to say, okay, we know that, you know, when you go through a divorce, it's a difficult time, you might need some time off.
Yes.
Have you linked into some supports? Is there anything I can do to help as your supervisor?
Yes.
We're in this together and we'll make sure you're okay.
Well, it's actually quite interesting, that question, because the MATES program and the general awareness has been basically for workers. And the supervisors that I employ, yes, they can understand what's going on, but there's not directly been about their pressures, their problems. And they're trying to run a job with 20 or 30 blokes.
With competing priorities.
And enormous pressure on a job.
Yeah.
So that issue, that second question about the organisation providing leaders with training in suicide, I'm going to say disagree, but I'm going to have to put question marks, because that's going to challenge me now to say there should be some leadership training, not only for themselves and how to manage themselves, but also how to manage others
people
getting exposed to that type of environment. So our organisation equips leaders. No, we don't. Our organisation, our leaders and managers receive training. No, we don't. This is a real challenge you've put to me now, and I'm going to have to think about it.
That being said, you've mentioned you've got a really good workplace culture.
We try very hard.
And people are the culture. So
Yes.
it might be that some of these skills are already a part of their leadership style. It's just enhancing it through a bit of structured training.
I would like to think that, but I also think they get under enormous pressure. And I just tend to say, keep working, mate, stay on program. I don't quite cut them the slack that maybe I should at different times. And that's a learning for all of us.
Absolutely.
We don't have HR. We certainly got grievance procedures in our contracts, but
That's good.
we don't have HR and we don't have an internal, so I'm going to put disagree.
So if things escalate in terms of a HR matter, who approaches?
They'll come to me.
Okay.
Eventually they'll come to me. They'll go through the site supervisors and they go to the project managers, and if they can't fix it, it'll come to me. If we're having a fight with a neighbour and there's a possible brand or reputation damage for our firm, if we're in a school and there was some critical incident, then I'd want to know about it straight away. That would escalate
But
pretty
you've got
fast.
a process around that. And a policy.
Absolutely,
Yeah, great.
there is a process, Our organisation promotes the range of internal mental health. We're only just starting.
Yeah, but you're
So I'm going to put agree, because we are starting that. Our organisation, we do have EAPs, but as I said, I think it needs a bit of work. Our organisation promotes the range of external. Oh, what's that about? Is that other organisations?
Yeah. So
Like
it might be Mates.
Beyond Blue or
Beyond
someone?
Blue or
Yeah, no, we don't do that.
okay. It's pretty straightforward, so it might be something to think about.
Some might have closer knowledge, with the salvos, or some people have their own linkages, but we don't promote apart from mates, we don't promote anyone else. Confidentiality, we've talked about that. Strongly agree. You have to be confidential, otherwise this completely fails.
But is there a policy around that?
Our EAP says it's confidential.
Yeah, good.
But that's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it might be, again, just about embedding some of that really good culture you've described into a formal way, so that if a new person comes on, they don't just go, this is a great culture. They can see that it's written.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Black and white.
If they looked up our EAP policy, they could find that it's confidential, but that's all. The process for accessing internal, external is clear and simple. We've probably learned a bit through osmosis. So I'm not going to agree or disagree. It's not clear or simple. They have to ask people and then get told it's on our website, and then they go into our policies, and then so it's probably not clear and simple.
And that's potentially where, like, you've obviously got a contract with that.
Yes, we
EAP.
do, yes.
If you read the fine print, sometimes they're actually obligated to come out and put up posters and talk to staff, separate to any incident that might have happened, separate to just generic counselling, just as part of your agreement with them to be a provider.
I haven't seen that.
So it might be worth having a look.
Absolutely. The early intervention is hard for us. We're still a bit too reactive. So I'm going to make a note that we've still got reactive, and but we want to get on the front foot.
Absolutely.
So that's sort of work in progress. Now, what's the next phase here? Return to work?
Return to work and ongoing support if someone has a mental health challenge or needs some time.
We are big enough to have a return to work rehab and return to work. One of our trained supervisors has got a rehab and return to work ticket.
Has it ever had to incorporate mental health?
Yes, we did. We had an incident of PTSD with one of our staff, for which we involved mates.
Great.
To be fair, and that was then managed through return to work and work cover. So we.
And you found that process fairly straightforward, or it was difficult, or?
I think work cover are better at physical injuries, because psychological injuries create another level of complexity.
It's a pretty significant burden of proof.
And it takes longer. And so yes, we got there in the end. And the case managers for work cover were excellent.
Good.
And they also talked to us about a graduated return to work and how that could be. And, my own bias at the time would have been, we have no light duties. I've grown up a bit. That's not true. You can actually do things.
Absolutely.
And that's that value of work.
Absolutely.
That you talked about before.
Particularly if you've had some challenges and
so they can come back
and get connected into a team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it keeps you in touch. So we haven't got a return to work plan, so I'm going to say neither agree or disagree. But
you did with that individual work?
When we had the incident, we then developed a return to work plan. Return to work plans are tailored to individual needs. Absolutely, strongly agree. Return to work plans are developed in consultation with the staff member, their health professional. Absolutely, it had to be done collectively, or you can't. It won't work. You can't impose to somebody who's not well. It's just you can't do it. Return to work plans are reviewed. No, they're not. I'm going to disagree with that. Our organisation provides flexibility where possible around work hours to facilitate staff staying out or returning to work. We will work in with the experts. If they tell us that they can only do 4 hours a day, we'll do 4 hours a day. But we're not experts, so we will just take the advice.
Which is great.
So I'm going to neither agree or disagree on that. And our organisation ensures ongoing peer support. We were keen that our supervisors kept in touch with them. So yes, I agree with that.
Great, we're almost at the end.
Our organisation provides support for bereaved workers following the death. Death's hard, death's still a bit, we just give them as much time as they want. And
so you strongly agree?
we give them time, but we don't give them necessary support.
Okay.
We give them time.
Yeah.
We just say, you just come back when you're ready, and they take leave, and then they take unpaid leave if they need more time.
Sounds like you've got a structure though that would support them in terms of EAP.
It
Supervisors who
would be
understand.
there, and their mates we'd expect to give them a call because we're a small company.
And there's a good culture.
And there's so yeah, we do a bit of that. So our
And again, it
provides
might just be
ongoing support.
about,
I'll put agree.
Formalising that through a specific policy.
Well, as I say, no one likes to talk about death, so I'm not going to have a policy on dead people.
Well, it's more about if you have a loved one, a significant other who passed away.
Yes.
This is how the company will approach this, so that there's certainty for the supervisor, there's certainty for the person who needs to take some leave, and you're not left, like you mentioned, feeling a bit uncomfortable because it's very clear.
I feel very uncomfortable, so I'll put work in progress.
Okay.
And we'll see how
Something we can work on
where
together.
that leaves us. Yes. And the last series of questions. What is
Now,
this
these
for?
are just some general things we'd like to know about the industry. So they're just some questions about how you approach.
So our organisation has a desire to reduce suicide among the work. I strongly agree. It might have taken us a long time to wake up to what's really been going on out there, and we're still not there yet, but we think that suicide is preventable. And the more people who think that, and the more steps people take, the better our industry will be.
Absolutely.
So I would describe the mental health climate in our organisation acceptable. I'm not going to tick any great boxes yet because we've only just started with GAT. We've only just started. We haven't got connectors yet. So once we start getting the whole gamut of GAT, connectors, assist workers, we then ingratiate the whole culture of mental health. That's still a journey. So
The thing about this survey as well is that we do it annually. So
Right.
if you start to implement these things and we run through it again, you can compare how you were going, say, 12 months ago to after you've implemented some of these initiatives.
that's really, yeah.
Yeah.
Well then, in a year's time, I'd love to think we've moved a bit along the scale. How often does your organisation engage with the following? We've got mates, so I'm going to put that down as regularly. The others, and we've got the EAP. I don't know who the others are. Who's heads up? Who are they?
So they're a mental health service that can come to site and support people if needed.
Right.
But
Okay.
I think they're fairly strong in other states. So,
Right, okay. Well, that's why I haven't heard of them. Do you think the following barriers affect your organisation's willingness and ability to implement workplace suicide? The economic cost of training. Yes, there's always going to be an issue about how time is actually more important than the fees of the training. And if I take a foreman off a job for 4 hours, I know that that job sits there without supervision. I haven't got the luxury of teams and teams of people to fill in behind. So there is always a cost of training, but often it's the opportunity cost of having them off the job
Absolutely.
than the cost of the fees for the training. The time taken out of work, well, that's the one I was just talking about. Willingness of employees to talk about suicide. Do you think the following barriers? Absolutely. Absolutely.
Do you think it's getting better though?
I do think the stigma is coming down, but blokes are still blokes. You know, them to talk about anything is a big deal, personal,
Yeah.
let alone something like suicide. So all I can say is that the stigma of mental health's coming down. There was a time where if you had depression, you were just so soft. That's no longer acceptable at any level. Or you're a malingerer trying to get out of work. That's no longer acceptable at any level. So that's helping. But yes, I think the industry still has to realise it's a lot of work to do. To your knowledge, has your business been impacted by suicide? Well, yes.
Okay.
We've known people who have died from suicide, and we've had family connections to other people. So we haven't had suicide on a worker, but we've had people very, very. I say my PTSD guy was traumatised by a site accident. So yes, suicide of a site worker off-site has happened. and that has definitely affected the way the business works.
The reason we ask this question is to show and demonstrate that there's a strong correlation between having a good mental health culture within the organisation and trying to prevent death by suicide.
Okay. Well, we're taking that on,
which is great,
from the GAT training.
Fantastic.
That says, you know, if you have an understanding that this problem is real, not made up, that there are factors that the industry clearly contributes through its economic pressure, through its maleness, through its culture of not talking about issues, and giving permission for people to say that is not acceptable, then, well, we're all having baby steps.
Yeah, which is great.
Baby steps.
And this is what this is all about.
And
so
then
the
this
final
last
question,
one?
that's just in case you go on holidays for a long period of time. It just gives us someone else to contact.
To be fair,
You've never had
there's a
holiday?
couple of my project managers who I would call my 2 ICs.
Great. So you could just
that,
put there.
that I can easily put in there.
Great.
And I would like maybe them at some point to be exposed to some of these questions, because the boss never really knows what's going on. And you might get a disconnect that shows that I think I've got my culture going well, and our project managers say, mate, he's the hardest ass of all. We don't. He told you porkies. Our culture's shocking.
So maybe next time we can get him to fill out
Great
the survey.
idea.
Yeah.
Okay, Nick.
That's the end.
Thanks
so
for your
thank you
time.
very much for your time.
Thanks very
John.
much.
No worries.
So my name is Laura, I'm the research manager with MATES, and I've just been asked to talk about the employer survey and what we do with that data once a company has completed it. So once you run through the employer survey with a company, we take it and we enter all of their data. And then what we do is we run some analyses of how that company compares to every other company that's done that survey to date. And from there we produce this short report that goes to each company, and it gives them a sense of how they're performing across those 5 pillars. So basically it's this snapshot to say how well a company is doing when it comes to providing a safe workplace. So a company might be doing well on one pillar, so they might score really highly on providing suicide prevention literacy. And that might mean that they get mates in to do GAT training or connector training, and they have a couple of assist people on staff, and they might do some additional things around suicide prevention literacy as well. So having peers in the industry talk about their own experiences of suicidal distress and recovery. But they might do not so well on other pillars. So when it comes to like mitigating harmful aspects of work, maybe they don't really have a protocol around bullying, or maybe they don't have any policies in place for supporting staff returning to work. And what that means is that it'll show up in the report, and it starts a conversation there. We can say to them, well, you're doing really well in these areas, but there's actually some areas for improvement, and we need to start talking about those and deciding what to do next. So that report is incredibly valuable.
So Laura, how long does it take to do one of these surveys? It looks like there's a fair bit of work from your end.
Yeah. Look, in terms of rolling the survey out on site itself, it would probably take around 15 minutes. But in terms of getting the data back and producing a report, it depends on the survey. So the employer survey is pretty quick to enter and pretty quick to turn around. So that would be returned to someone about 1 to 2 weeks.
So if someone's got a question about the survey or any of this process around how to roll it out, how do they get in contact with you?
So you can reach me on my work email or call me on my work mobile as well. If you've ever had any thorny questions come up when you're trying to roll out a survey, or if some of the process just seems a little bit awkward and clunky and you're not sure what to say at the start of a survey or how to close it off, or even how to bundle the data together, just get in touch and we can hash it out in person and figure out the most straightforward way forward.
So Laura, sometimes when I've done the employee survey, a manager on site might be a little bit apprehensive around the purpose and how the data is stored. Do you have any hints or suggestions for field officers in how to manage that conversation?
Yeah, so if there's any sticky questions that will come up from a site supervisor or a manager, you can reassure them that the design of the survey has been completed by an independent university party, so it's not just mates coming up with questions that they want to put to workers. And you can also just talk them through that the data is stored confidentially, it's on a password protected secure server, It's being analysed by a research team that doesn't share any of that data with anybody else, so no individual responses are shared back to a company or shared within Mates. And what we produce is an overall picture of what's happening on a site. So we don't pick anyone out by name or pick out any individual responses. It's really just presenting a kind of big picture snapshot of what's happening on a site.
And it sounds like stressing confidentiality is really important.
Yeah, I think stressing confidentiality is crucial. It's important for companies to understand that, you know, we don't talk about what's happened with company A to company B when we meet with them next or things like that. So yeah, the confidentiality thing is really the goal to, it's really the most important thing when you want to secure legitimate data.
And so now that you've seen how a company engages and signs up to the blueprint, I just wanted to talk through what happens after they've endorsed the blueprint. So we provide, through the National Research Team, a report attached to that survey as to how the company rated their own overall performance against those 5 pillars versus every other company that's ever filled out the survey over the last 2 years. And so we ask you to sit down with the company and go through that report with them. And that means that at times they might need some additional supports, whether that's sourcing the right EAP, whether that's getting somebody in to look at their policies and procedures, whether it's some refinement around how they engage subcontractors within the company and or on site. Peggy from the National Office and myself are always available to provide you with some resources, tools or information about what those supports might look like and where they exist in the broader community. We also ask you to get 2 things from the company. The first is a copy of their logo so that we can put that on our Blueprint website. And the second is a few sentences or a paragraph from a representative from that company around why they support the Blueprint. We then put that on our National Blueprint website, and it just demonstrates to the broader industry what companies have signed up to the Blueprint and what things they have to say about the process. So thanks for reviewing our process around how we engage and sign a company up to the Blueprint. I'm really conscious that there's a lot of collective wisdom from field officers around the country engaging in this activity, and that you probably have your own comfort levels and ways of rolling out this survey with an individual company or site. And I just wanted to reiterate that we can all really learn from each other, and there's no right or wrong way to implement this survey. I'm pretty confident that together we can sign up even more companies to this great framework and hopefully lift the bar across the industry when it comes to suicide prevention and workplace mental health and wellbeing.